Hi, this is Mike Paulson. Welcome to another one of my PowerPoint video sermon series, studies, whatever you want to call them. Now, this one is going to be my favorite subject. This is music, and you put music together with Bible, and I could talk for days and days and days. I've been involved with music since second grade, and I will say for all the things that I've done with music, I've never quite let it become my God, as most musicians do. I've dabbled in just about everything you can with music. Everything from I started in playing piano in second grade and band in fourth grade and played trumpet for many years, piano, always have. I've recorded a couple hundred piano hymns on YouTube or on internet. I've been involved with schools from 3,000 kids to just a few homeschool kids. I've been involved with adult choirs, adult orchestras, choir 90 people. Um, taught in high schools, taught in college, taught adults. Um, Ended up teaching elementary music, K through 6. Then they got me into kindergarten and preschool. I've seen everything, just about everything composition, then teaching composition, arranging. I mean, I've dabbled with it all and never got really good at any of it. That's probably how I could put it, a dabbler, a music dabbler. I put that together, though, with my years of studying the King James Bible, no other preachers and teachers and books, just reading it myself and enjoying music myself, all the various performers. Anyway, it just music is my thing, and if you put it together with the Bible, I could talk for days and days and days and days and days and weeks and months about Bible and music. It is a fantastic study. It is the second most important study in a Bible. Jesus, of course, being number one, but there's more. It's the second most amount of references is to music in the Bible. Over 500 references. I've looked at them all, studied them all, and it all came together. And we're going to try to put that all together into this one particular PowerPoint sermon study here, calling it Absolute Music. You'll see why eventually here. Absolute Music, the birth, the development, and then a little play on words, development. Hope you get that. And the rise and fall of the universal language, music. And the Bible calls it more like a voice than it would be a language. So people all over the world will respond to music, whether they know it about it or not. Doesn't matter. And so it really truly is the only and universal language. We will be looking at, as it says here, looking at the history of music in the world as exposed through a King James Bible in the world's historical events. And as I always say, these things are only found in the King James Bible. You can't find these in other Bibles because they change verses, they change words, and they take this teaching right out of your hand, right away from your eyes. So, quick summary here: we have God created music for His worship. Oh, and by the way, I realize that many parts of this sermon or this presentation, the print's going to be too small. It just doesn't come up on a computer screen through a video that well, PowerPoint especially. And I've been told for years, Mr. P, you're making those things just too tiny. Well, I had to get everything on that paper. So I do have these all my sermons here, all these videos available on PDF. Just print them off and you can read them much clearer, because I do encourage you, I expect you, if you're interested, to check out the Bible verses. Don't just trust me for it. Put your confidence in the Lord, not in me or my PowerPoints. So these things that you can't read will be available also online. Just print them off. But for those that have trouble seeing, as I do, here is the audio of all what I love to teach. So back to music here. God created music for His worship. Job 38, Psalm 68. I could spend hours on Psalm 68, verse 4, by the way. God develops music for goodness, for joy of man, Ephesians and Colossians. It is for His joy, but it is there for us, and it has grown over the years into what is called absolute music, and then it fell away. We'll get into that here. Satan slowly took over music to use it for his worship. It was his goal. He wanted to be like the Most High, and he wanted worship. And that worship is getting more and more toward today. I do believe that he is being worshiped in the local churches today. And when the Antichrist comes, and demanding the music, which you'll see as we talk about here, they'll just be itching and waiting for him to come out of the sky and their church music is already rolling into it, and it's all coming together. God takes music back eventually. He fixes it up and uses it for his worship, of course, forever. Now, in this video, we're going to start off with some questions that'll spark, hopefully, some thoughts and awareness for you, a little bit, some questions, I hope, for you. I'll then show you the influence music on the world from the three races: Black, white, and brown, Oriental, African, and European, beginning with one musical sound and leading up to what in Daniel is called all kinds of music today. We have over 2,000+ various genres, however you want to pronounce it, of music today. So all kinds of music is pretty much where we're at today. You can get it all anytime you want. I will show you then also the details showing the birth, the development, and the development of the musical eras and their relationship to world events from the beginning to today. And then I will show you the destructive role the modern Bible version movement has had in changing the purpose and use of music in your local church. It has massively changed. And I know some of you are not happy with it. You're still in that church. There's something going on in your church. I wish you could give me a chance to tell you what's going on scripturally, of course. I will finish by briefly describing how the three basic elements of music affect us: melody, rhythm, and harmony. And we'll end with a bonus conclusion and a joyful reminder that the scriptural promise of the return of absolute music. Okay, so let's get into this one. This is the one you're going to want to probably print off later here and get into. Music is a universal language, universal voice, and is the most powerful language voice in the entire world, in the universe. So what do you know about the language, the voice of music? Are you aware of the original design and purpose of music? Do you understand the daily design and purpose of music? Do you understand the joys as well as the dangers of music? And when you talk to people about music, I have learned that if you talk to them about the dangers or what's not good about music, they do not want to listen. They do not want to hear. You knock their favorite singer, their favorite group, their favorite music. Music is more important to people today than their Bibles. We used to argue with people about different Bible versions, so we could show them some things based on the King James Bible. Not interested today, not interested at all. Not even interested in their church, because they'll change church over the music program. So music is the most important thing in people's lives today. It's amazing the power it has on us. Are you aware of the subtle change in music that has been taking place over the years? Note by note, beat by beat, musician to musician, Genesis to Revelation, true worship to a false worship. Are you aware, have you even ever heard of the importance of the term absolute music? What is absolute music? Do you know the important role absolute music still plays in our music today? What do both God and Satan have to do with the elements of music: rhythm, harmony, melody? Melody is a spiritual element with music. It's for God's spirit and man's spirit, and it's a spiritual thing. Harmony, it's mental. Harmony, it's emotions. Different chords, different progressions create different emotions in people. And then we have the rhythm, the physical, the flesh, and the beat. What role, if any, should music play within a local church today? Are you aware of how modern Bible versions have created a false gospel, false worship role in the local church today? And even things without life, giving sound, whether pipe or harp, except they give a distinction in the sounds. How shall it be known what is piped or harped? There are, it may be, so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification. They're important. Therefore, if I know not the meaning of the voice, I shall be unto him that speaketh a barbarian, and he that speaketh shall be a barbarian to me. If you don't understand music somewhat, if not a lot, then music has a power over you that you have no idea what it's doing to you, and it's just like a barbarian to you, and you will be treated like one with music. Now let's get into the details. First, let's take a quick look at the musical history of the three races and their effect on world music today. And we start, of course, with My Three Sons. Da, 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 da. You know the old TV show My Three Sons. And what we're looking to here is we're looking to Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This is where it gets started. You've got Shem, who heads off into the Asia area. Brown skin color, that's just how we define these things. Melody is their music. Their music is very melodic. You got sitars, you've got all their Japanese, Chinese instruments. They don't play duets, they don't do quartets, you know, all that stuff. Their music, now they've caught up with European music. They do really well. That's a whole other issue, I guess. Just stay on the trail here, Paulson. But their music in their culture is melody-based music. Okay, then we have a Japheth going off up into Europe. That's the white guy, and his music was all harmony. You got the orchestras, you got the orchestra families, you've got the stringed instruments, string families, you've got concertos, concerto growth. I mean, you've got everything, and it's all based on harmony and emotions and excitement and sadness and the whole spiel like that. Okay. Then you've got Ham going down into the African area, and their music is all rhythm oriented, drums, percussion, that type of thing. Now, Asia came over to America many years before everybody else, and that's where they ended up with the Native Americans and the Native American music and their recorders and their little things that they would play. They didn't have recorders as such, but they had their things they carved out, and then they got it. Their music is very melodic yet today. And they have the drums as well. Influence eventually came to them, but you know, their music was melody oriented, Native Americans. Then you have the white folks coming over. Okay. Then you've got the Africans coming over with the slaves, Dominican Republic, Cuba, all that sort of stuff. They got themselves involved in New Orleans, jazz and honky tonk, ragtime, et cetera, and moved its way up into Chicago. You know, there's a bunch of history, and there's fascinating history. It really is. It's just I'm not going to deal with today, but I try not to anyway. Then I jump over to the beach music, the Beach Boys, and the early rock of America. Elvis Presley, Beach Boys, go down the list a mile long. Many of us still listen to them and still hear them. We know who they are, et cetera, et cetera. Jan and Dean, there's another one, you know, on and on it can go. But then we had the British invasion, where the Beatles came over and changed music everywhere. Now what we have a conglomeration of melody, harmony, and rhythm. In fact, Duke Ellington, I think it was Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman, Carnegie Hall brought the white music together with the black music, the white instruments with the black style of music, jazz. And so all that kind of mixes in America. And then what we see here is we see America being overtaken by that style of music over the years. I should have had the Benny Goodman thing before the Beatle invasion, but I didn't think of it till then. And then that music from America expanded out into the world everywhere. All the world fought it. Russia used to say, Beatles, you're not playing, no rock music allowed, but they finally gave in. Everybody gives in. That's just what it is. And now these days, as the world's turning to the East for their spiritual philosophies and their music and stuff, we have Arabian, Middle Eastern music. So it's come that far, and we see where this is all headed. To all kinds of music everywhere. Music, again, is the power that has united all the church denominations, just uniting the countries in a way that is not good, because like I say, Isaiah and Ezekiel talk about how the devil's goal is to be like the Most High and to get the worship. And here's our established verse for that. Then Harold cried out in Daniel chapter 3, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, which is an early trombone, by the way, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music. you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And you know the story there. Therefore, at that time, when all people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now in Revelation 13, the whole chapter is worth reading, but picking these verses out of there, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So over the years of study, I'll show you more here. We see that music is a power that is going to get people together to worship the coming Antichrist, the beast, and if they don't do it, they'll be killed, just like Daniel, Shadrach, and Abednego. I think that's how that goes. Not very good at winging my memory anymore. So now, let's get into the finer details. Again, this is the sheet that you're going to want to print off. We look at the general eras, okay? We have the Dark Ages, 500 to 1500, the Renaissance, and I think some of you have heard this in your schools and your teachers. I hope they've taught you this stuff. Then you've got the Baroque era, 1600 to 1750, and then you've got the Classical era, 1750 to 1825. And I'm not going to give you a quiz or a test over any of this, although I'd like to. You really should learn all this stuff. It's fascinating stuff. It really is. Then you've got the Romantic era, 1825 to 1900, and that's emotions. I'll say that right away. It's not romanticism, romanticness type of thing. Kids always giggle when I tell them about the Romantic era. The Modern era, 1900 to 1960s. We're not in modern today, even though we use the words like that. It's not modern. It's specifically 1900 to 1960s, even in art. Popular era, 1940s to 70s, give or take a few years, and what I call the demonic era, 80s to the 2000 nows kind of thing, and now we're into all kinds of music, global, the whole global scene, digital scene, the whole thing, all kinds of music. Up at the top, you'll see melody only. So when music first came around, it was melody only. Then you've got the biblical era, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. In Job, sing unto God, sing praises to his name, extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name, Yah, and rejoice before him. It was all melodic. Music is the second most noted topic in the King James Bible. Now, some of the men important to music in the Bible: Jubal, the first musician; Shem, Ham, Japheth; Moses, Shaniah or Kaniah probably; Asaph, Amos, David, Satan, of course; Daniel, all the different Israelites; and then, of course, Paul and Jesus Christ. They all have something to say or to do dealing with music in your Bible. Then we go to the Dark Ages. Terrible time. They call it the Middle Ages because they don't want people to realize that, well, it was the Dark Ages. State church banned all singing unless approved by the church. Had to be sung in Latin. Instruments, the few there were not allowed except within the church. Notation was developed, a Gregorian chant named after Pope Gregory, Ambrosius singers, no Bible allowed, music centered on the Latin Mass, minstrels, Meister singers, persecution ruled daily life. The music of the day reflected their sadness and daily fear of the church. Plain chant, pentatonic scale, and monophony. What in the world are all those things? Those are all different types of singers and different groups. Some were poetic. Ambrosia was a poetic bunch. Plain chant was even before the Gregorian chant. It was not very pretty. It was just all melodic, but it wasn't exciting. It was all, you probably heard about the Gregorian chant. It's become pretty popular. The pentatonic scale was created after just 5 notes to the scale. And the monophony is just one melody. That's all they had. No harmony, no instrumentation, none of that stuff. It was really pretty dull. And again, it was all controlled by the state church. A few of the names: Gabriel, Deparay, Dufay, Guido, I think Guido probably also did some rough life. Anyway, bad joke. Arizo. So there were some. It was a you know busy era for music, but it was all controlled again by the state religion. Okay, now we get into polymelody, which is more than one melody at a time. Somebody got brave and they played something. Same time somebody else was playing something, and nobody told them to be quiet. Apparently, that's how that probably came about. Again, the Renaissance is an era of rebirth of lives with freedom away from church. Protestant Reformation, the music became joyful, and the Bible, there's getting ready for that 1611 to come around. Created Protestant religions, and they had their music. It was new stuff, but still had horrible conditioned instruments, recorders, drums and the strings. You ever hear them? Madrigals and bards, again, the poetic, different kind of groups of women, groups of men that would go around singing. You see them in schools. They have madrigal groups in schools now singing this stuff. They came up with voices with equal parts, polyphony, more than one melody at a time. The chorale, 4-part harmony, had to have been pretty wild in those days. Simple musical ideas, violin developed. They had a rhythm that was kind of floating and just kind of never had any meter as such, the 4/4, 3/4 stuff. It just was kind of floating around. Harmonies were modal, which is based on modes, different kind of scales, not quite what we're used to in the Western civilization. More Gregorian chant sounding. And then you've got the lute and the crumhorn, the shawn, the doodle sack, which is a bagpipe type thing, and you got your flutes. Some of the composers, again, would be Martin Luther, and not just composers, but important musicians. Martin Luther, Palestrina, Byrd, not the basketball player Byrd, but Victoria, Monteverdi, Frescobaldi, and Lassus. And then we start up at the top. Notice that harmonies, they've kind of developed some harmonies. Now there's purpose behind these harmonies. They cause people to respond, to do something. Notice we're growing in involvement in music here. 1600s now. Power of harmony developed and was greatly used. This is where the beginning of absolute music as a sound. Absolute music is the rhythm, melody, and harmony in complete total balance, and the music was written and performed for the sake of the beauty of music. That's what absolute music is. It's in balance, and it's beautiful for the sake of the sound of music. Didn't create any trees or pasture in your mind. It didn't have any TV for sound effects, for setting the moods, anything like that. It didn't get into sadness and happiness. It was music written for the sake of listening to beautiful music. Equal tempered tuning, which when they started tuning pianos and things like that, there was a tuning process that was developed so they could play harmonies and it wouldn't sound near so bad. It was all fine tuned in their sound. Chamber music, which are small orchestras, orchestra was developed, organ liberated. It became the great big beastly organs you see in the churches today. Birth and development of instrumental families. They really developed more than just born, but they had your families. You got your violin, viola, cello, bass. You got all the different families. You've got percussion, woodwind, brass, brass, percussion, woodwind, string. There we go. Shame on me for forgetting that stuff. Harpsichord was the most popular instrument at the time. Use of ornamentation, which is just like decorating a Christmas tree. They put a lot of frills and trills in their music, little twinkle here's and all that kind of stuff, a lot of fancy little doohickeys going on. Biblical characters used as most themes and librettos, which is the words. Oratorio, cantatas, operas, fugue. They're large groups singings, or they had opera with everything was spoken, but they're sung while they normally would talk. The cantatas are religious in their oratorio was religious in their content, and a cantata they would just stand. Everybody would just stand and sing. The Hallelujah chorus, the Messiah, oratorio, that type of thing. Fugues. One melody starts and they keep adding more of the sonata, concerto grosso, which are things performed solo, was performing with an orchestra. Basso continuo, where they wrote music based on the bass line. Music and art painting are similar in design. I'm telling you, it was quite an era, and you'll see music is developing. And I'm really trying just to zip through this thing here quickly. Composers during that time: Bach, Buxtehude, Clark, Corelli, Handel, Lully, Pachelbel, who wrote to me the most boring piece in the world, the canon, Pachelbel's canon. Everybody has to have them at their wedding. Oh my gosh. Purcell, Vivaldi, Telemann, Gluck, Couperin, Scarlatti, Torelli, Bieber, that is not Justin's family, just Bieber, Schutz, and that's not from Hogan's Heroes, that's a different one. Isaac Watts, John Newton, those folks got involved with what we would call today Christian music. Isaac and John Newton got that started. Okay, moving along to the classical era. Melody, harmony, rhythm, balance to purity and sound, and that's where absolute music took its control. All elements in balance. Absolute music peaks. It's reached its top. Symphony developed, orchestra growth, string quartets, classical sonata. There's different forms that have to take place within those sonatas. It takes an education to understand music, and especially to understand these eras right in here. You have to study this to appreciate them, and the intensity of the design is just beyond, it's just fantastic. Variety of emotions, formal style with music design where strict form was followed. Everybody, when they wrote something, they followed a form to it. Very organized, very ordered. Elegant music, instrumental music era, the standard of excellence of all music during that classical era time. Composers, Bach, bunch of Bachs actually, the whole Bach family, Clementi, Czerny, Gluck, Haydn, Mozart, Salieri, Schubert, Stamitz, Boccherini, Düsseldorf, Beethoven, Lazaruk, and Bortniansky, all sorts of names. Now, see, Beethoven, the great man that he was with his music, he was then started to write about his feelings and his emotions. And that's we have the Romantic era. Harmony that Beethoven wrote created intense feelings in his listeners. So when you listen to music and you listen to Beethoven, you're hearing the person of Beethoven. When you listen to Mozart and Haydn, you're listening to music. While they all have their own styles, it wasn't their personality that came into their music. It's how they wrote. Beethoven, you've got a man who's got intense emotions, and he started up the Romantic era. Self-expression, greater freedom in their musical form now. You can't control your emotions into a certain little format, Minor modes, that would be more sad. Created a picture in the hearer's mind. You would hear that music and you would picture something. Increase the use of dissonant, which is when two notes clash, they don't sound right. It's the sounds you hear when you go to a high school band concert. Oh, that didn't sound right. Well, that's the dissonant sound in there. Changes of rhythm styles. The piano music, everybody plays piano. If you took piano lessons, most of your music was written in the Romantic era. Era of vocal music, the singers. Era of piano vocal together. When you go to music contests in your schools and stuff, what they want you to be singing is music from the Romantic era more than anything. Concertos, again, which are things a soloist performed with an orchestra or whatever. Lied, which is German singing. Opera growth. Opera was huge by now, and it was based on their country. Had Italian opera, French opera, German opera. They were very strong about their countries, strong nationalism, and Orientalism started to pop up, and this is where the Eastern music is starting to enter into the picture here. And who are some of the people involved with the Romantic era? We got Berlioz, Brahms, Chopin, Liszt, Mendelssohn, Paganini, Rossini, Tchaikovsky, Verdi, Schumann, Strauss, Schubert, Franck, Offenbach, Bizet, Meyerbeer, Paganini, Czerny, Saint-Saëns, Bizet, Mussorgsky, Modest Mussorgsky, I love that guy's name, Dvorak, Grieg, Puccini, Mahler, Weber, Rachmaninoff on the piano, wow, Wagner, Fanny Crosby. These are Christians now that got involved with music. And they wrote their 4-part hymns. There's just a fantastic history to study in there too as well. Fanny Crosby, Philip Bliss, Ira Sankey, Robert Lowry, William Doane, Stebbins, Daniel Towner, Charles Wesley, Lowell Mason, Havergal, William Kirkpatrick, who started Sunday school programs up, and the songs that they were singing in Sunday school are the songs that they used to sing in the churches today. And they've kind of gotten that out too by bringing in their rock music to keep their teens happy. Bradbury, Mason, and Howie. Oh, take a breath. Now we jump into the involvement of rhythm. Rhythm becomes much more important than harmony, becomes much more important than melody only. In the modern era, new harmony structures, dissonance on purpose. They wrote the stuff on purpose. 12-tone roll. You can't repeat any note twice until you played the other 11. It's just horrible sounding stuff. Polytonality, two different kind of, more than one type of tones going on. Polyrhythm, different rhythms going on. Aleatory, chance music, meaning what happened is what you had. It wasn't written ahead of time. One guy wrote a piece for 12 radios. Okay, that's called chance aleatory music. Electronic music, now it's no big deal today, but it was huge then. Impressionism is emotion, serial music. You get into, again, back to 12-tone rows and things. Musique concrete, where it was just made up on its own here electronically. Atonal music, microtones instead of C, D, E. You've got in between levels in there. Did you know that when you hear a fire alarm tone, it's in between an F and an F sharp or whatever, because they won't blend in with your music you're listening to. You'll stick out of the you'll hear it better, and that would be because they're into microtones now. Non-conventional stuff, totally. And as we have decided, it shows pictures of their mind. They're so whacked out in their brain when it comes to music and world. Famous people: Barber, Bartok, Cage, Copland, Debussy. He wrote a couple nice pieces. Elgar, Gershwin, that's George Gershwin. Stravinsky, whose first performance was tomatoed off the stage in Paris. Poulenc, Schoenberg, horrible sounding stuff. Ravel, Stephen Foster wrote his music during this era. Hindemith, Ives, Irving Berlin. And these are the guys, Irving Berlin and Foster, for example. I'll talk about them in a minute. Glass, Shostakovich, Messiaen, Britten, Honegger, Sibelius, Prokofiev, Leonard Bernstein. And then a couple of Christian folks writing their stuff, Excel, Doan, Cushing. And what some of those folks, I mentioned Irving Berlin, and especially Irving Berlin, blended folks into the popular era where rhythm is more important now, and yet there's still melody. And this is the era of popularity. Irving Berlin wrote some great songs, and so does Stephen Foster. So it kind of blends into now where it's getting away from this modern weird sound, but the rhythm. This is Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman getting started with jazz and classical music, mixing them together with instruments, and so the rhythm to the melody becomes popular to people. Popularity is what's important, not necessarily their talent. Media influence, TV, radio in those days, especially radio and movies. Music is going to mimic Ham's beat. The beat is in there now. Nonsense words, well, when I'm getting into that, stay on the trail here. Jazz is Ham music, and Japheth did combo stuff. Swing and Dixieland used as death note to Japheth because white music is just going down. The classical stuff is not popular anymore. America's where it's at. No longer all this was taking place in Europe up to this point. Famous personalities, I don't call them composers as such, but personalities, sure, we know these names. Sinatra, Crosby, Como, Dinah Shore, Cole, Nat King, Cole, Dean Martin, Patti Page, Shaw, Miller, Glenn Miller, Jimmy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, Gene Krupa as a drummer, Rosemary Clooney, Duke Ellington, Count Basie. We know the names, and their music now is very rhythmic, but it's still melody. And some jazz harmony in there so much, but the domination now is popularity and the beat rhythm. Then you get into the 1980s and the 2000s, you get into where Satan is glorified. Their listeners are, I thought the guy that said this really said it well, are fornicating, murderous, rebellious cult of dope-headed sex, wicked perverts, and Satanists, blasphemous against the risen Christ. Pentatonic, pentagram is now important, which is a 5-sided star, demonic, and the music, there's even a group called the Pentatonics, all from Eastern replenish themselves from the East in Isaiah, and that's something to read someday. Mocks biblical teachings, intense rhythmic influence, terribly intense. Lennon, Guthrie, King, Kiss, Santana, Stewart, Cooper, Joplin, Zappa, Bowie, Crew, Dylan, John, Madonna, rappers, Manson, Elvis, Beatles, Elton John. The list is a mile long in that era there. Overpowering rhythm is hypnotic in its importance and fleshly desire. You just get caught up into it and you just can't help it. And there's over 2,000 various genres today. And what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, all kinds of music have followed down in worship. And that's what's going to happen when they worship the beast. Okay, there's your history of music in detail. Take a breath. Now, we're not going to read through all these things and the rest of it here, but we're just going to look at, if you print this off, if you look on this thing, you can see what was going on the same time all these things were taking place, which was really important for kids to realize as you study history. Beethoven and Mozart and Sinatra, they all had different parts of history. So it's always nice to know what was going on during those times. So I list a lot of world events that were taking place during this thing. You've got your treaty declaration. If you know history, then you'll be able to fit these things in there with where music was doing what it was doing. Bubonic plague during the Renaissance, Age of Enlightenment, Protestant Reformation, deadly and torturous inquisitions during the Renaissance era. Terrible things being done to people. During the Baroque era, you've got King James doing his thing. Guy Fawkes failed gunpowder plot, had to throw that. They tried everything they can to get rid of the King James Bible, even at the beginning of that thing being printed. 30 Years' War, Catholics and Protestants, English Civil War, Great Fire of London, the Salem witch trials. Then we have the Great Awakening, which I do believe is a false gospel awakening, by the way. Ice cream invented. I thought that was important during the Baroque era. Classical, now down towards the bottom there, French and Indian War, Boston Tea Party, American Revolution. When music was at its peak of beauty, the absolute music, we had a revolution going on here. Ben Franklin doing his thing with his kite, first newspaper, cartoon, Join or Die. Lewis and Clark was out, popping around through the country here. Missouri Compromise, Monroe Doctrine, Louisiana Purchase, War of 1812, Trail of Tears, as hard as that was. Vesuvius erupts, Boston burns, mustard was invented. There you go. And that was during the classical era. Wow. The Romantic era, emotions, biggest thing that going on around here was the Civil War. Then you've got during the modern era when the music was just sounding absolutely dissonant and just crazy. You have the Depression going on, the flu epidemic, 20 million dead, and they didn't shut down the businesses during that, although a lot of people died. Such is life. Russian Revolution, World War I, World War II, San Francisco earthquake, Wright brothers, nuclear age gets started. That was quite a time, that modern era. Get into the popular area, we got the Korean War, Vietnam War, Cuban Missile Crisis, space race, Alaska and Hawaii became states. McCarthy, who I believe was totally right at the time, assassinations of Kennedy's and Martin Luther King, Great Society, from Johnson, Nixon impeached, Iran hostages, Civil Rights Act, folk music, feeding a warlike teen rebellion. That was all brought about by folk music in America, by the way. That was the popular era for the young people. Wrapping this up with world influence of the demonic era, well, that's the pentatonic and the pentagram. That was all what was going on here, based on Renaissance era occultism. The pentagram found its way into symbolism of modern occultists. Anton LaVey said, a pentagram with 2 points up, inscribed in a double circle with the head of a goat. Inside the pentagram is the logo of the Church of Satan. A reverse pentagram with 2 points projecting upwards is a symbol of evil and attracts evil, sinister, and wicked demonic forces. And if you look in the record covers, as we used to call them, or the music covers, you'll see these kind of symbols and things. This is a terrible time. Future music in the world, these are my thoughts. According to music experts, music evolving will continue. Hits will last forever. New image for self-made global stars. Virtual reality will be the new normal, meaning it's not really them singing. It's all computer generated. Everyone will be their own creator, composer, creator. Music will become more global. Wearable tech will transform music making as well as performance. Live experiences will be madder, wilder, more chaotic. Artificial intelligence will play a huge role in pop song writing. Radio it will grow into more than get way beyond just plain old radio. Well, there you have it. I mean, there's your stuff. Print that off and see how much of that you've been taught in your life or in your school. And there should be a lot of stuff there for you.